Okay, what I'm going to show you in this video is how to rebuild a ROM set for MAME 2003 Plus. So whilst it's not really RetroPie specific, this video, it's more about MAME, it is a ROM set that's geared for a Raspberry Pi, for a MAME emulator to run well on that. So it is quite RetroPie related in that way, but what it is mainly is around MAME. It's going to be a long, waffly video. I'll warn you now. The actual process of rebuilding will probably be 5 minutes right at the end. But what I want to do is just run through the steps that explain why this works and why it's used to get a MAME set that does work. Like I say, I'm going to do it specifically for MAME 2003 Plus, and I'll run through some reasons why that's going to be the best case here for a RetroPie setup. What I'm going to show first, though, in this arcade section, you can see, actually no, not the arcade section, ignore that. In the MAME section, if we go in there, you can see 3 ROMs that I've put there. And I just want to show what are quite a lot of forum posts and posts on Reddit and general user experience come to when it comes to MAME, because it's not as straightforward as other consoles. It is still quite logical and it makes sense, but there's a few more steps sometimes that are involved to get MAME ROMs working. So looking at the choice I've got here, I've got Asteroids, I've got Didonpachi, and I've already installed MAME 2003 Plus, which I'll show in a minute. But what will happen is people will have a whole set of ROM sets here, different games they can run. Some will work and some won't. And then people start thinking, well, some of them work, I must be almost there. I'll just try and configure something. Must just be a tweak somewhere. But that's not really the case, and it won't work on that basis. So just to show you, if I start Didonpachi here, you should get a little run command box pop up, and it'll just say which emulator I'm using, which is Clrmamepro 2003 Plus. So it just confirms that that's what's running the ROM, and then it'll have a think, and we'll see if it runs it properly. I think this ROM set's about 7 meg, so it's a relatively large one. Okay, so just get, it's obviously worked because we've got the warning copyright screen. We just run through it and show it does work. Plus I like playing it anyway, so it's worth saying what it is. Full extent of the law, blah, blah, blah. There we go. Okay, so put a few credits in.
So next, you're battle fighter. Okay, the countdown begins. 3, 2,
Here we go, in game.
1, go.
It is a good game as well, so it is an example. This is just pretty much straight out of the box RetroPie setup with MAME 2003 Plus. I've not tweaked anything except stuck scan lines on, because you can't play without scan lines. Other than that, it's just installed from the optional section in the RetroPie setup, which I'll show in a minute. And then this ROM just works. It's absolutely fine. There we go. Dead. But yeah, Didonpachi. There we go. Main game working right out of the box. So quit that. Now, let's say I've put Asteroids here. Okay, I've enjoyed that one. I want to play another one. Play Asteroids. Run that. And again, you should see the run command box pop up. There we go. Clrmamepro 2003 Plus. So it's the same emulator running Asteroids, and it just goes back here. And this is what a lot of people see when they tried running MAME, and that's what the posts will be. You know, I can't get this one working, but this one works fine. And I'll just try it again. You know, maybe if I do it a few times, it'll work. I mean, it absolutely won't, but just showing that it's not something that's a one-off. And the reason that that Didonpachi one works and the Asteroids one doesn't isn't luck Didonpachi, or rather, it is luck that Didonpachi worked. The only reason that these are working is because in this example, the ROM set here is exactly the same as several versions ago. So it just happens that this version of MAME 2003 Plus quite likes that, but it needs a different version of Asteroids. So any games that you might have in a large set where you're not getting a very good hit rate, the ones that are working, it really is just luck that they're working. So you shouldn't spend time trying to tweak things and configure things to get them work. You just rebuild the right ROM set, and I'll run through what that looks like in a minute. So first, if we just go back to RetroPie setup here. So out the box, MAME 2003 Plus isn't installed, so you go into RetroPie setup. This is RetroPie 4.8, by the way. and on a Raspberry Pi 3, but it doesn't make any difference whether it's a 3, 4, 2. And they all work fine with this. Okay, so if we go to Manage Packages and Manage Optional Packages and go for RetroPie emulators. No, not RetroPie emulators, I think it's below that. It's libretro ones we want. There we go, libretro cores. MAME 2003 plus. So it says I've already installed it because I have, but then you just hit OK. It checks if there are any updates. And it says at the top there, you're running the latest binary. So I think what happens is RetroPie store all the binaries on their server, and when they see a change in the source, they rebuild a new binary to offer. So from the last time I've installed this, there's not a newer version, but then you just choose, it wouldn't say reinstall here, it just say install from binary, and it run through the motions, install it on, and you'll be up and running. So we go back there, back there, back there. Large FAQ on the forum about MAME, and I've contributed to as well, so it's useful to get the basics understood by looking at that. What I'll do next is flip to the PC and we'll run through the steps of rebuilding the right romsets that will let you play all of the games first time rather than a bit of a hit and miss. Okay, hopefully YouTube would do its thing and make all these different resolutions I'm showing merge and make it all watchable. What we're doing here is looking at the document section on RetroPie, which is a fantastic resource. Check it out. It's got loads of details on just about everything you'll ever need. But what we're looking at here is the MAME section, and specifically this table here. Now this table here basically gives you everything you ever need to know about MAME emulators on the Raspberry Pi. It's fantastically useful. This information you have to look all sorts of places to try and get these details, and now it's just in one table. So what it's showing you is on RetroPie, when you run a particular emulator, let's say Clrmamepro 2000, to run the ROMs successfully, you need MAME romset version 0.37b5. If you get that, 95% of the ROMs will just work. It'll be fine. If you try a random one or the latest one, whatever the latest one might be, you'll get a really poor hit rate. Hardly any of them will work, if any. You need to get this ROM set, and that's, I can't stress that enough. That will answer a significant majority of problems running MAME on any platform. You get the version, the ROM set version that the emulator that you want to run needs. If you're on PC and you just get the latest version of MAME, then you just get the latest version of the MAME ROM sets. But on devices that have got specific sort of forks of the MAME program, then you need to make sure you get the right MAME version. So this is, really, if you know for whatever reason you really want to run advanced MAME 1.4, you get this ROM set version and it'll be working. But what we're looking at here is Clrmamepro 2003 plus. The reason we're looking at that is because it's been built specifically for sort of single board computers or lower powered devices to still run efficiently and well. So it's a good choice for the Raspberry Pi for that reason, but also the version of the ROM sets it wants over here. Let me just scroll over there a bit. So the version it wants is 0.78-MAME 0.18. And what this means, it doesn't mean you pick any version between those and it'll work, or you pick all of them and it'll work. What it means is it's based on 2003. So if you've got MAME 0.78 ROM set version, pretty much all of those will work fine. But then what they've done is they've gone for future MAME versions and backported those games and the fixes and the different updated ROMs to work in this version. So it's a bit of a hybrid. It doesn't work on a single ROM set. It uses this as its base, and then it's got various ROMs that it quite happily run from future versions. So it's the best of both worlds in that it's written from a code base that supports or runs well on lower powered devices or Raspberry Pis and similar, but also it can run ROMs from much newer ROM set versions. So it's a really good choice for that reason. That way you don't have to just get a really new ROM set version. and hope that the emulator runs adequately for you. So that's why we're going to choose that one. And also because it uses a mishmash, sort of a 0.78 base plus various files from future versions, it's a good one to show an example of rebuilding a romset. And the rebuilding process will work for any romset version. It's just I'm going to show it for this one, but the same principle holds for any romset version that you want to rebuild. So we'll run through that. Also, I think this might be slightly out of date because it says here the sort of latest version of ROMs from MAME is 0.188, but I think it's even newer than that now. So this could probably do with a bit of updating, but either way, we'll cover that. I did write some notes down to try and make sure that I didn't forget anything useful. Let's have a look. No, I think that's it. Let's go to the next bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Clrmamepro 2003 Plus, which is over on this page here. So what you can see is when you install it, which we did a minute ago, it puts the ROMs in this directory, the binary of the file goes in this directory, and we'll be looking at the directories paths in a minute because that's where some of the extra files that we want to find are. So we'll check those out. But again, the document section here is really useful. Okay, so jumping across to where libretro MAME 2003 Plus is, this is just reiterating what its sort of goal and purpose is. So it says here it's a libretro arcade system. So your default controllers that work with RetroArch or configured with RetroArch will work with this one. So it's good on that score as well. You don't have to get custom key mappings. You can just use your existing one. And it says here, yeah, that's good for single board computers, embedded systems, and similar platforms. So emphasis on high performance. And also it says here that the reason it's based on 2003 is to take advantage of the performance and lower hardware requirements of that older architecture, and then they've backported those games. So you're getting an additional, it's either an additional 350 games or an additional set of games, plus some games have been improved. Maybe the sound ROMs are now working better, or the graphic ROMs are better. But either way, you're getting a much better experience, much wider range of playable games than you would if you just had MAME 2003, which otherwise is quite a good choice. But this one obviously is giving you a good range of extra games, newer games, which is quite often the case as well. So it's worth going for this set. And if there is a particular game you're after, they've also got this live compatibility table here. And this is really useful to see exactly what the state of a given game is with MAME 2003 Plus. So that's here. You can see all of the games that the latest version of MAME 2003 Plus support, and if there's any issues with them. So things like imperfect sound, it'll run fine, but maybe the sound isn't completely 100% accurate to the original game. But it might be really close. So you can just check the status of any favorite games here. I think if we go for an example, actually, what one did I write down? I think it was Flag. Let's have a look. Flag Rally. There we go. Yeah. So this one here, Flag Rule 96 Flag Rally. It works fine. It's said it works fine in MAME 2003 Plus. What we can do, and we can see how or why that works fine in MAME 2003 Plus. So on this site here, I'll put other links in the description. You can check it out. It says this is the ROM we're talking about, and you can see that it was first emulated in MAME from version 0.171, but MAME 2003 only supports 0.78, which is quite a bit older. So what they've done is backport this ROM to work with MAME 2003. And we can see if we go to the versions up here from the MAME site, you can see that version 2003, here we go, 0.78 came out in 2003, so MAME 2003. But the version that this game was first emulated in MAME was 171, which is all the way up here, which was 24th of Feb 2016. And if we hit the what's new on that one, we'll probably see the new games that are emulated here. There you go, 96 Flag Rally. So it's the MAME 2003 base, but this game came out way out, or was emulated accurately and workable way after that, and they've just backported it, and it now works. There's lots of examples of those games that you wouldn't otherwise be able to play. So it's really useful for that. And do check out the MAME site, because it's obviously really useful resource there of exactly what version came out when and what was updated in it. So it's a good comprehensive view of all of that information there. Okay, so now if we go to actually building the romsets, there's a step-by-step guide almost here for MAME 2003 Plus on the LibRetro site, and it's sort of broken up into 3 steps. So the first step is all about obtaining the XML DAT, and this is the most important section, really. It's really what it's all about. This is how you get an accurate ROM set. Obtaining that XML DAT file is exactly what you need to do, because it will have reference in there to the exact ROMs that every ROM set should have. The ROM set is, for example, ddon patch.zip. It's all the .zips. That's a ROM set. In the ROM set, you have the ROMs. So in each zip, there's a series of individual files that are the ROMs. So this XML DAT will show you that. And I'll just get an example. Okay, so here is a DAT file for MAME 2003 Plus, and you can see it's all readable. It's just split up into each individual game. So there's the start of the next element here. You can got that game we were looking at, Flag Rally Night 6. Oh yeah, Night 6 Flag Rally. And in there you can see that for MAME 2004, for this DAT file that's for MAME 2003, it's got a list of all of the names it expects, along with, I guess, their checksums effectively to make sure that the file they're looking at is exactly the file that it's looking for. And it's got, I don't know what, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 15 different ROM files in that zip. So this is how the tool that we'll use, which would be Clrmamepro. Yeah, Clrmamepro. We'll use that in a second. And that's what this will use to find out exactly what files need to be built for that. This is how it knows which ones are wanted. And in all of the different MAME romsets, these zip files or these romsets will have slightly different versions depending on the state of the emulation of that particular game, whether a given ROM has been extracted or not, or successfully or properly, whatever it might be. There are slight differences. So this tells you definitively for MAME 2003 Plus, if you have these versions, it'll work. You've got something a bit different, it won't. And that's what we use the software for. So it's quite useful just to see. That's what a DAT file looks like. It's just got a load of games split up with all the information in it about exactly what ROMs are needed. With those DAT files, you need to make sure, as I've said before, and I'll probably say again in a minute, that it's really, really important that you get the DAT file that has the ROM set versions for your emulator. You need to make sure that you get the DAT for that emulator. So if we're using MAME 2003 Plus, we need not just the DAT set for MAME 2003 Plus, but for the version even of MAME 2003 Plus that we're running. So we can check that with looking at the command line interface, and we can get the DAT file for this. There is a link to a DAT file for MAME 2003 Plus on RetroPie forums, but that's for a specific version of MAME 2003 Plus. It's not the latest one. There's a slight difference between that one and the latest one here. So if we go to the Pi and we go to, I get the directory for where the MAME 2003 Plus is installed, we can see some information on it. So here we can see this is the LibRetro core for MAME 2003 Plus, and you can see the binary, which is this file, was created March 23rd, so just a few days ago, 10:49 in the morning this one was. So that was built from source at that date, and we need the XML DAT, the DAT file for this version here. And when you download it, it also downloads this metadata folder. If you go into metadata, you can see that here is the DAT file for that version, and that is the exact DAT file for MAME 2003 Plus in this specific version. So you can just, however you want to get that file off the Pi and get it to your PC. I use a FTP program, but however you need to. So that's the way to get the file that you know matches the emulator you're looking for. Alternatively, you can just run MAME 2003 plus, and when you're running it, if you press tab, there's an option that says generate XML and of the DAT file or something to that effect, and it will generate it dynamically. So it'll automatically just produce it again for you in a different folder. And if I flip to that folder, it's here. So I haven't read these parts out, but you can see it. You can just retype that. This folder is under the ROMs directory, and if we have a look in here, this is where I've put. Actually, if I go back a directory, let's just have a look at that. So here are those ROMs that we were looking at before: Asteroid, Dodonpachi, and you also get a subdirectory when you install in 2003 plus in this ROMs folder, ROMs MAME retro, and then in there you've got MAME 2003 plus. If you go in MAME 2003 plus, whoops, no, that's wrong. Hang on. Try that again. Get there at the end. Hang on. Right, in this directory, when I generated it, it's put the XML file there, and that might be easier to get hold of because it's within the ROMs directory, so you can just fish it out there. And that one I've checked is exactly the same file as the one that's in that binary folder that we saw a minute ago. So either way, just grab that XML file, and that is your DAT file, and that's the key to rebuilding an accurate ROM set. Okay. So next, step 2 is finding a source for the ROMs, which is quite key really, because you can't rebuild a ROM set without some ROMs to rebuild from. You need something that can't just magic it up. So the 4 things that's listed here are a complete MAME 0.223. So here we saw earlier on the RetroPie site, I think it quoted, what was it? 0.188, but now we're talking about 0.223. This one's probably more accurate, so you need at least version 223. I think the latest might be 224, but either way, where it says a complete MAME 0.223 ROM set is needed, I'd just go for the latest one. It's probably going to avoid a lot of potential issues in the future, so I do just go for the latest one. Yeah, this will work, so if you've got that one, fine, but I just go for the latest one. So yeah, you need a complete ROM set. Second thing you need is for that ROM set version that you get, then you need the rollback ROM set version for it as well. So with each main ROM set version, there is released a rollback version as well. The rollbacks are just all of the ROMs that are no longer in the latest version, but they did exist at some previous point. So it's like all the changes basically that are no longer there. So between the full set and the rollback set, you've got pretty much every ROM that was ever released in a MAME release. That's why those 2 files are really important. You get your version of MAME and the equivalent rollback version. The rollback ROM set is probably about 8 gig or something, whereas a full version, it depends what type of set you get, but it'd be anywhere between, say, 70 gig and 120 or something like that. So they're fairly big, but you only have to get them once. The next point is a MAME 0.78 CHD collection. So CHD is basically a disk image, so they're quite large typically, and not that many games need them. And the reason they've got 0.78 is because this is based on MAME 2003, which is 0.78, and I presume that at no point is there any more support for newer CHDs, so that's why 0.78 is fine. I'm not going to bother getting this because I don't think I even play the games that need the CHD files, so it's not essential. But if you want a complete set, then yeah, fish this out. It's going to be quite big. I don't know how many gig that CHD set is, but it will be quite big. And I can't remember which games it supports, but I don't think it's that many, so I won't worry too much about it unless you want a completely up-to-date accurate set. Anyway, and the last point here is you've got to have the Neo Geo unibios to play the Neo Geo games. So you can, and there's a link here to get that. Although for some reason I think, anyway, yeah, get that as well, but it's not that important unless you want to play the Neo Geo games. But I think the reason I'm pausing is I think you get the BIOS in. No, you can't get. Don't know. I need to try playing the Neo Geo game. That's what I need to do. Anyway, do as it says. Just get it. Right. So you get these files. But on this first piece here, the romset collection, you get well, you don't get prompt. There's when you get your romset version, you might be offered the choice of 3 different types of romsets, which are the 3 different kind of formats they come in, which are split, merged, and unmerged, which I'll run through. And it's kind of important you understand the difference. And you can see down here they recommend a full non-merged set. And there's reasons for that. It's not necessarily the best route for you, but it's probably the safest, broadly speaking, for everyone. And I'll run through why that is in a second. But to understand split, merged, and non-merged, you kind of have to understand some of the relationships that MAME romsets do. And I'm only going to do this, I'll just talk through this really quickly. So here we go. We've got an example on Dodonpachi. In MAME, ROMs are either, broadly speaking, they're either a parent or a clone. That's it. The parent will run. So this is a parent example, and it's a parent because it doesn't have. It says it's not a clone, but it has clones. So this one here is a parent file, and if I go into a clone like this Japan one here, it'll say this is a clone of this one, and it's a clone of a parent ROM. So it's like parent-child, but instead of child, they're called clones. And the point here is with a parent file. So here, if I look at the ROMs, so it says it's got 12 ROMs in here. So in that zip file, it'll have these 12 files, and they're all in that ROM set. So that's a parent file. It'll run. That's fine. Now, if we go to a clone, like this one here, Japan, so it'd be minor changes, maybe a little bit of language change, or possibly a sound effect change or something. Here, if we go to the ROMs, it uses 10 from that parent set and 2 of the clone set. So here, to run this clone, it would need 10 of those files from the parent and 2 unique ones just for the clone. So on these, on this particular ROM set, which is Dodonpachi J, it will need these 2 files that aren't in the parent because it doesn't need it. So that's what a parent is, one that runs on its own, and a clone is usually using some files from that parent to be able to work. So with that in mind, if we look at this picture here, now I've just ripped this off RomVault. I haven't done that myself. It's a really good diagram, really useful. So check out RomVault. It's they've got some software that does this whole rebuilding process and manages your ROM. So really good software, really good site. Check it out. But this diagram is going to be really helpful just to explain the different sets that you can get. So here you can see we've got non-merged, split, and merged. So when it's split, a split ROM set is you have all those parents, so Dodonpachi, for example, and it's got all the files in, and then the clone only has the files that are different. So in that Dodonpachi J, there were 2 different files, so it would just have 2 files here. That's all the clone would have. But that means that to run, the parent has to exist as well. So the emulator would run it. It would find the 2 files here and go, hang on, I need another load of files, and I know that comes from the parent. I'll look for the parent, find all the files, and run it. But if the parent doesn't exist, it's not going to work, which is kind of the experience you see when you run the ROM and it just goes back to emulation station. It can't work. So split sets are very dependent on having the parent for any clone that you might want to run. It might be that you don't want to run any clones, so it's not a problem. But if you do, you need the parent there. So the description here, the clone set contains only the variation files. So here, just the ones that are different, not included in the parent. The clone set is dependent on the parent set, so you must have that parent in the folder for the clone to work. That's split sets. So merged sets is different in that it gets all of the files of the parent and all of the files of the clone and any clone of that parent. So if that parent's got 5 clones, all 5 clone files get put into the single set here, which means that you've got all of the files needed to play the parent or any clone, but it will only run the way you name it. So if you call it Dodonpachi, it would run the parent. If you called it ddom patch J, it would run the clone, but then you'd have to manually rename it unless the emulator says, oh, I can see it's a merge set. What one do you want me to run? But I don't think any of them do that. So I'm not sure the best use case for merged. I don't know why you need why merged would be better. But please, by all means, stick it in the comments on YouTube so I can learn something and see why a merged set might work quite well. And as it says here, the parent and clone sets are combined into a single folder or archive. So it'll just be, ddom patch.zip, but it'll have all of those extra files. So if that suits what you want to do, then go for it. But non-merged is what's recommended with RetroPie. I typically use split usually, but non-merged is a good option as well for this reason. So non-merged says, right, here's the parent file, all the files in it. Here's the clone file with my sort of unique file that the clone needs, but all of the files that are in the parent, I'm also going to put into the clone, which means that if the parent file then gets deleted, the clone will still run quite happily. It doesn't care because it's found all the parent files in its own .zip file, or romset, as they're called. So non-merged is a great choice. It's a lot safer. You can go around deleting loads of other files and it won't affect any other file because each one has all of the ROMs inside it that it needs. It doesn't need to reference anything else. So here, the clone set contains all common files of the parent. The parent set and clone are independent. Yeah, so you can delete one, the other, any old file, and it doesn't affect it. But you can see here from the visual layout that non-merged is using a lot more disk space, whereas split doesn't need to replicate all the files because it just goes and jumps in the parent. So you can argue, if you want to save on disk space, that split would be more efficient. But if you don't care about that and you just want to be sort of deleting any individual files without worrying, oh, hang on, can I do that without the parent and keep checking that, go non-merged. And through this example, I'll run with a non-merged setup so we can rebuild the non-merged approach. But yeah, just bear in mind you can save disk space if you go for split. And yeah, I'm not sure merged is a good bet for what we're trying to do here. But there might be other cases where it's a good choice. But yeah, this is a really useful diagram. So what we'll do now is we'll run Clrmamepro. I don't know what CLR stands for. If somebody does, please put it in the comments. MAME probably stands for main, and professional. It's a great bit of software. It's been around 20 years plus, probably. It's really popular. Not necessarily massively intuitive at the start, but it's very functional. I tried using some other software like, was it RomVault, RomCenter, Rom something else? There's loads of pieces of software out there that rebuild. But because I got the hang of it with Clrmamepro, the other ones just confused me, so I just stick with this. Anyway, let's fire that up. So when you open it up for the first time, you'll get this profile. Well, the first time I think it says, welcome, this is the first time you've run it. Click OK, etc., etc. Then you'll get this profile window. The profiles is essentially where you put your DAT files. So we know we want to rebuild a set that is compatible with our MAME 2003 Plus, which we saw in the directories. Actually, it's here, isn't it? So we saw in these directories, you can get it from your ROMs directory if you generate it in game, or you can just get it from that binary folder up here. So this is the file we want. So I'm going to hit add data file, and I'm going to say MAME 2003 Plus. It's about 20 meg, and I'm going to load that up. So hit open. It says, where do I want to put the data, or the DATs? Profiles folder is fine. I don't want to create a directory, it's fine there. Okay, so it's put it in new DAT files, and there it is. And I want to use that, so I'm going to click load and update. Now it says there aren't any Clrmamepro settings for that file. What do I want to do? And I want to choose default. That's the one I'll click. And also, when you run this, it's usually easier if you install it outside of your C drive, certainly outside of any sort of protected folder. But if you do, wherever you install it, change the properties of it, right mouse on the executable and choose a compatibility tab and just say run as admin to get rid of the checks, the permission checks it keeps doing. So you'll see that in its own instructions. It says, run as admin, just to avoid any permission issues, basically. Anyway, hit default. Here we go. So default. and it has a bit of a think on that DAT file, it'll often come up with a few small issues. Just hit OK to all. It's not, I won't worry about them. They're minor. Okay, then you get this massive UI here. You can scan, rebuild, merge, settings, profile, or about. Profile is where we just were, so that's where the DAT file is. And that's kind of the profile that you're now in. And we're going to set the settings for that profile next. So in settings, what we need to do is say, what folder do we want to create our new ROM set in? So you just create sort of, before this, just create a folder, an empty folder somewhere where we want to put these ROMs that it's going to build to match the DAT file, which will work with MAME 2003 plus. So I've chosen ROM pass up here. Oh yeah, when you're using this application, just about every button and any text section anywhere has a tooltip. So if you just hover over something, it will explain pretty well without you having to go into the help file exactly what it does. So do sort of check out the little options. I've put a tick in this box saying make backups to folder. So if it does change any files that you don't want it to, or whether you want it to, but you want to have backups so you can see what it changed, you can just make sure it does that. And when you're doing this, if you've got a particular MAME romset that you're using in Clrmamepro, it's absolutely worth backing that up first and just work with a copy of it, so you've always got that absolute original state, just for a bit of peace of mind. So I wouldn't run this for the first time on a set that you know works really well with a particular emulator and you don't want to muck about with it. So yeah, just use a copy. So what we're doing here is creating a ROM path for where we're putting the new version. So we hit add, and we're going to choose a folder. If I go into MAME, I've got an empty folder here where I can put ROMs. So I've said, right, I want to build my new ROM set into this empty folder. But yeah, just create whatever one you want. And that's pretty much all I need to do in that screen there. I close that, and then I can rebuild my ROM sets. And I'm also going to go in Scanner in a minute. But if I start with rebuild. So first it's saying, right, I'll rebuild, but where should I rebuild from? So this is where you say where your ROM set is. So your latest version of MAME ROM set here. So hit the three dots and choose in MAME. I've got 0.241, the non-merge set. So I click that. It'll have a think. There's a stack load of files in there, so it'll have a bit of a moment. Probably stop responding for a bit and then come back to life. There we go. Hit OK. So I've told it, right, that's where you can find all of the ROMs, and this is where I want you to create the new versions. We told it where the DAT file was earlier in the profile process. And this bit here is quite important, merge options. So I know this set is unmerged or non-merged, same thing. And what I want is I want the new version to be non-merged as well. So I'm going to hit non-merged as a bit of a think, and then it knows it will create that. So yeah, that's what the set type I want. So I've chosen that. I'm also going to hit advanced here, and this bit here, separate BIOS sets. So rebuild BIOS ROMs to their separated BIOS set. If disabled, they will be rebuilt to each set. So this is where, if I go back to here, and where was it? Here, it says we recommend the full non-merged. And when they say full, it's about this separate BIOS set option. So it means if you untick this, it will also take the BIOS and put it in that ROM set as well, which means that it doesn't need to look in the normal ROM location to find the ROM because it's already in the ROM set. So it's even more standalone. And I think that's why it's recommended, because if it's that standalone, it's going to be quite hard for something not to work. So it's kind of making everything foolproof. You definitely don't have to do this, but in this example, I'll say, okay, I want the BIOS to be in those ROM sets as well. And that's what unticking this does. If I tick it, it wouldn't put the BIOS in there as well. And it's probably normal not to have the BIOS in there, but I think the guides here are really saying if you put everything in there, it's going to be very difficult for it not to work. So we're on with that. To save it, you don't press anything, you just press the cross up here. So it's a bit weird, but that's how it works. Yeah, and then I could just hit rebuild. But before I do, I know it's going to, I'll show you it, complain first. There we go. Scanner and rebuild differ. Do I want to continue? No. You can continue, but what it's complaining about is here I've chosen non-merged, but if I close that and go to the scanner, in the scanner option, it says split set. So I want non-merged on my scan as well. So now I've chosen non-merge, I'll close that, back to the rebuilder, and then I can rebuild. So it'll take the ROMs out of here and the ROMs and the romset, so it'll read them all, it'll pass it through the DAT file to say which ones do I need, and it'll put it in the destination. So if I hit rebuild, there we go. So it's running through all of those ROMs and creating new ones. Now, this would take about an hour and a quarter, which even I can't talk for that long. So I'll stop this in a second, and I'll show you in best Blue Peter style one I've made earlier. But yeah, this takes about an hour and a quarter on my machine, so your mileage is going to vary depending on your PC. Mine's AMD 5600X CPU, so 6 core, and the ROMs here are on a SATA-based SSD. So that's kind of your guide. If you've got a faster PC, it's going to be quicker. If you've got a slow PC, it's going to be slower. But I find it's quite happily let you crack on with doing other work at the same time. It doesn't need to be on focus all the time or just left alone. You can just carry on and then come back when it's finished. But like I say, a full rebuild is about that sort of length of time. So I'll cancel this. Do I really want to stop? Yes. Okay, gives me a bit of a status. And what I'll do, I'll just point it at the one I've done before. So my destination, I will change to this folder, which is where I've rebuilt to originally. Okay, so I want to take all my ROMs and I want to rebuild here. Now, because I've already done it, this shouldn't have much to do. So I'll hit rebuild. I have a thing. It's still going through a lot of data, but you can see it's much quicker than before. This isn't going to take anything like hour and a quarter, but it's still going to take too long, so I won't complete this. You can see 0 is created because it doesn't need to do anything. Now, when that completes for you, what you'll get is a status window that'll pop up, and I'll show you by using a smaller data set so you can see it quicker. So we'll stop that. Now, when you finish that, you've run it against the main ROM set, but you also need to run it against the rollback ROMs. So you hit the folder here and change the source, and we'll have rollback ROMs here. Say OK, and we want to rebuild against them as well. So because just running it against the full set won't get all of the files at once, you do need to run it against the rollback. So you run it against rollback, which would be quicker because it's only 8 gig in size. It'll run through this. Then at the end, it'll come back and say, okay, I've done that, everything's rebuilt. And then what you want to do is work out, well, how successful was it? And you can do that with the scanner. So if you go to the scanner now, let's get that window in there, the status window. Okay, we put non-merge sets. We said just check it all. We don't need to change anything here. No, I don't care about samples or CHDs. CHDs I spoke about earlier, the disk images, I don't care about those. And samples, I think that's just the WAV files for a handful of games, so I'm not too bothered about that. So I've unticked those. And on the advanced, I'm saying that I want to scan it for the BIOSes to exist in there. So again, I need to untick that to match the rebuild process. So the BIOS files will be in there. And then you just hit new scan. And I think that's a lot more errors than I was expecting. Okay, I worked out why I was getting all these errors just then. It's because in my settings in here, I've still put that original empty folder, so I need to change that. I'll remove it and add one. So we'll add the folder that I've actually got all the rebuilt files in. So made the scanner look in the right place, basically. So I've changed that, close that, back to scanner. I'm hoping I won't get quite so many problems. So on advanced, I've said, yep, separate BIOS sets is unticked. New scan, hopefully not so many problems. There we go, that's better. So what we can see here is it's still not happy, but there's hardly, out of thousands of files, I'll check how many it is in a minute, but it's a lot. There's only like 10 problems. So these particular ROMs, they're complaining that if I pick one, I know Mortal Kombat 2 Plus is missing some ROMs. In fact, all of the problem here is missing some ROMs. But these, you can see, they're not ROMs that have been released within the MAME romsets. They're custom or ROM hacks, or you need to get them separately. And another line that was here was Final Fantasy Anniversary Edition, which I went and ran and got separately. That's why it's no longer on the list. So I think if you hit set information here, that's gone off the page a bit. Hang on. Set information, you can see on any given one, and I wonder if I can find Final Fantasy here. That's BIOS Neo Geo. Is it a standard they're under? Final Fight. There you go. Final Fight 30th Anniversary Edition. It's got the extra ROM sets there, which I've got a separate video of. I've uploaded. Anyway, bit off track there. Yeah, these are the ones it's not happy with. But it doesn't mean that the ROM set doesn't work. It just means that these games won't work until you find the individual ROMs. But yeah, it's just a handful. So if you want to go and find them, you can find them, and they will work as well. So just to quickly recap on that Clrmamepro, you come in and the profile it, and you add your DAT file, hit load update. Then in your settings, you put the ROM path of where you want to rebuild to. So that would be empty to start with. There won't be any files in there. Then in Rebuilder, you put the source of where your ROM sets are, both, to start with, put the main one, or it doesn't matter which order you do it in, but you need the main ROM sets and the rollbacks. And then you rebuild into that, and you say that you want to run non-merge sets. On the advanced, you want to untick BIOS so that the ROM sets have the BIOS in as well. I leave everything else as default. I think it'd do it quicker if you didn't recompress the files, but we just left defaults. And then to make sure that your end set of ROMs, use a scanner, and it will just tell you at the end of that scan what the results are from your completed rebuild. And if you've only got a handful of errors like that, you're doing fine. If you've got hundreds, there's something that's gone a bit wrong. So I'd run through the steps again, but again, just make sure that when you scan, you're on non-merged as well. But otherwise, I haven't touched these settings other than in advanced. Just map that's unticked as well to match the rebuild, and that's pretty much it. So in terms of rebuilding, I know that I've talked for ages about the background of it all, but the actual steps are really straightforward, and that will make everything work a lot more reliably. So what you can see here is the folders that we've been working with, and this is the one I've rebuilt into. Now if I get the properties of that one up, you can see it's 17.5 gig, which is significantly smaller than your original sets that you rebuilt from. For me, that's still way too big, and I don't want 17.5 gig of ROM sets. So in here you can see there are over 5,000 ROM sets, and loads of these will be cloned. Because I'm not that interested in clones, I typically strip them all out, as well as strip out all of the Mahjong games and the mechanical old games that aren't that relevant, and some other categories. And you're left with a fraction of this, of still all of the quality games. I'll do a separate video on how you can strip out different categories and get a smaller folder size. I know you can get cards that are, half a terabyte micro SDs. And so this isn't really a problem, but do you really want 25 clones of Pac-Man or whatever? I mean, there aren't 25 clones of Pac-Man, but you get the idea. So, yeah, I think it's still too big, especially if you go unmerged, because then, as we saw, all the clones will have all the parent files in as well. So it's a lot of disk space there. But just to prove that process does work with MAME 2003 Plus, I will pick a random ROM and see if it works. So if I just go down here, stop there, click there, right, D-Day. I don't know what that is. Whatever D-Day is, I'll copy it across the Pi and see if D-Day works. So I'll do that now. Okay, so here we are back in Emulation Station. We've got D-Day, and based on everything we've just run through, there should be no reason why D-Day doesn't work. Let's give it a go. It's going to look bad here if it doesn't work. Okay, MAME 2003 Plus is trying to run D-Day. And it does run D-Day. So that is up and running. Let's see if I put some credits in. And this doesn't look like a particular... Oh, okay. Alright, so I'm at the beach, and it looks like I've got to take out, what, the tanks? Yeah. It seems like it's a one-button game here. Left, right, and shoot. Oh, what happened there? I died? What did I die from? Oh, something obviously hit me. Oh, no, it's nighttime. Okay. I don't know if it's my favourite main game, but it works, and that's what we're really showing here in the video. So hopefully, if you follow those steps, you should be able to get a solid romset version of your MAME ROMs to work without problem. And you can rebuild for that MAME 2003 Plus, which, as you saw, was a bit more involved than other ones, because the other emulators say, right, I just want this version. So if you find that version, you're done. But with MAME 2003 Plus, you've got to either, you might find a ROM set out there for a given version, but it's less likely because it spans all of those different ones. So rebuilding is probably the best way to go there. And you can use that rebuilding technique for any ROM set that you might need. For any other emulator that you might want. And it's not limited to MAME. There's FBA, FBA Neo, and other arcade emulators as well. They all run on the same sort of principle of they need a particular ROM set version to work. Hopefully this was useful. If you did like the video, please give it that thumbs up. And if you want to see a video on any particular topic, do put it in the comments. Do read them, and I'll make notes, and hopefully I'll get around to them all. And thanks for